Be sure you download the note card that goes along with this sermon, and you can print it out and you can follow along, fill it in as you follow the sermon. If you like this sermon, want to see more like this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, also hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when other new content is added to this site. We try to add sermons as often as we can. We'll try to add some Bible question and answers that we've done before in the past, other things we may be adding to this. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to follow us on social media, there are links to our social media accounts in the video description below. Now, let's jump into the sermon. This lesson, number 8 in our study of the book of Numbers. On the screen, you'll see the old traditional route that has always been thought as the route taken by Israel coming out of Egypt and prior to getting into the Promised Land, which I believe has since been proven not to be the correct route, but we will see that in just a few minutes. Now, we've already talked about a 37.5-year gap between chapter 19 and chapter 20, verse 1 of Numbers. And we'll get more into that when we get into Deuteronomy, because the first 4 chapters of Deuteronomy, Moses is going to give the new generation a review of Israel's wanderings. Now, with this lesson, we are going to find ourselves in chapter 28. And this overview from the Bible Projects group shows to be in the plains of Moab. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes as well. Again, plains of Moab. We've been through the rebellion and the plague, so forth, and we're at the point of going to receive more laws. The new generation is going to get these laws because the old generation has passed. We saw that in the last lesson. Chapter 26 pointed out that when they did the census, that the census that Moses and Eleazar had done, there were none that had been listed with the census that Moses and Aaron had done in chapter 1. We did notice roughly 18,850 different lower number in chapter 26 census, then in chapter 1 as well. The theme for the book of Numbers, of course, has been consequence of disbelief in God and disobedience to God. What happens? A review of how the book is broken down, the old generation, transitional period, new generation at the doorway to Canaan. And as we pointed out, the old generation at this point had fallen, except for Joshua and Caleb, and of course Moses hadn't yet, but Moses is not going to get to go in the Promised Land either. We've covered chapter part 2 already, moved on from that part. We are now into part 3, and we are Numbers 28. We will begin with verse 1. Now, looking at this map, this is what archaeology, latest archaeology, has pretty well shown to be the case on the trip. Now, I'll talk in the next lesson. There is some belief that rather than wandering around in the wilderness 38 years just going aimlessly in a circle, that they spent a lot of time at Kadesh Barnea. We'll talk about reasons for that in the next lesson, the last, which should be the last lesson in the book of Numbers. So be ready for that. And if you want to sign up, subscribe if you're on YouTube,
like us on Facebook, or send an email, and we'll get you on the list so you'll know when that lesson is going to come up, that we'll finish Numbers and we'll get ready to start the book of Deuteronomy. Here is a white background version. The other was a topographical, and I like topographical because we can see the terrain that they had to deal with. Now, Mount Hor we have up here at Petracella, Kadesh Barnea, right there in the same general area where Aaron dies. Now we kind of see where they are and how they're going to go into Canaan above the Dead Sea there. They are currently in Moab, and I'll let you see this map here. Notice you have a border between Moab and Ammon, which is the Arnon River. They're about lower portion of the Dead Sea, Salt Sea, it's called on this map. And below the Arnon there is Moab, the plains of Moab. Now, to see it better, that's kind of a slight topographical, and you kind of get the idea of the region there. But to really see it, take a look at this map. This, I believe, is what they would call a satellite view of this map. Around this time period, they think this is how this will be laid out. There's the Moabite area. They passed through the Edomites, and note where Kadesh Barnea is located, Deuteronomy 1, 19, 20. Now the thought is, and we'll talk about this a little more next lesson, is that they spent possibly 38 years there at Kadesh Barnea. And I think more and more indication as to that being the case. But I want you to see where we have been, and where we are currently located in the Moabite region. And if you'll look right above the Arnon, there is an area called the Plains of Moab. Now, that's possibly where we are now. And you'll look at Numbers 36:13 particularly, and particularly when God's told Moses to go look on the mountain. He's going to see the Canaan land, but he's not going to go in. So we kind of see where we are in that regard. So with that, let's look at chapter 28. Chapter 28 of the book of Numbers, and let me grab my Bible and I'll have it there so we can get ready to get started. Don't do like I did. Have your Bible ready as you start this. And so we have got pretty good sized print here so I can see this as I'm looking at other things as we go through this study. Again, what we're going to get the new generation is going to hear about these offerings, and for us, we might think this is kind of boring because we don't do these things today. But the Lord speaks to Moses, saying, "Command the people of Israel." Now, notice a command is not a suggestion. Command is not an option. Command is absolutely required. So command the people of Israel to be pleasing to God. Say to them, my offering, my food offering, my pleasing aroma, you shall offer, be careful to offer to me at its appointed time. Offer it when I want it offered, God says. We have a continual burnt offering every day. There it is, morning and twilight. Every day there's 2 lambs. Now, I don't know the difference other than maybe the way they're turned. One of them's got light color ears on this picture, and I don't remember now what. what I did that before. Okay, there it is. So he says, verse 3, you shall say to them, this is the food offering that you shall offer to the Lord, 2 male lambs a year old without blemish day by day. So we have 2 lambs. I think it's just that I didn't color the ears darker on the one. I've had people ask me, is that a male and female? No, according to the Bible, it's 2 males, male in the morning, male in the evening, what we have. Day by day, as a regular offering. There it is, verse 4, one you shall offer in the morning, the other lamb you shall offer at twilight. Also 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a grain offering mixed with 1/4 of a hin of beaten oil. It is a regular burnt offering which was ordained at Mount Sinai for a... So in other words, you go back to the book of Exodus, or possibly Leviticus, you're going to find the instructions for that. Of course, that was to the old generation, so now they can go back to those writings and they can read and see this for themselves, since they weren't possibly alive at this time. If they were very young. They wouldn't have known this. And so that's what we have going on there. And talking about its drink offering shall be 1/4 of a hin for each lamb. In the holy place you shall pour out a drink offering of strong drink to the Lord. The other lamb you shall offer at twilight like the grain offering of the morning, and like its drink offering you shall offer it as a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. So there's the daily offering. They were to do that daily. Now, Sabbath offering, we have on the Sabbath day up here 2 male lambs, a year old without blemish, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a grain offering mixed with oil and its drink offering. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath besides the regular burnt offering and its offering. So there's what we have there. So we have continue daily. Then on the Sabbath, what you are to do. Now they're getting this. God wants to make sure they hear this direct. They're not having to hear, well, this is what was told your parents. No, you're hearing this direct. Then we move on. Beginning of each month. You shall offer a burnt offering to the Lord, 2 bulls from the herd. There they are pictured. 1 ram, there he is pictured. 7 male lambs, there they are pictured. 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a grain offering mixed with oil for each bull, and 2/10 of fine flour for a grain offering mixed with oil for 1 ram, and 1/10 of a fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering for every lamb for a burnt offering with a pleasing aroma, a food offering to the Lord. So there's these offerings. We get an idea about these offerings. We have a Passover offering on the 14th day of the first month. Nisan is the Lord's Passover. On the 15th day of this month is a feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. So they're given the instructions for the Passover again, which has already been talked about in the book of Leviticus. We can go there and read. We can go read in Exodus and read. But this being the new generation, Moses is telling them again. We're going to see Deuteronomy is also going to tell some more. Offerings for the Feast of Weeks. We have what happens on the first day, on the day of the first fruits, when you offer a grain offering of new grain to the Lord at your Feast of Weeks, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work, but offer a burnt offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. 2 bulls from the herd, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old. So there's, again, picture of what they're doing. So we get the idea about the grain offering. That's chapter 28. Now, chapter 29, he says, in 29, on the first day of the 7th month, there it is on the chart. Now in the 7th month, first day, you shall have a holy convocation, sacred, a day for blowing trumpets, verses 1 through 16. You shall offer a burnt offering. Now this would probably be the shofar. They would be blowing, wouldn't be the same trumpets that they would blow, be more like a bugle. Well, I don't know that they would have any valves, I think of, but a lot of times people group trumpets and bugles the same, but there is a difference. A trumpet has 3 valves where a bugle has no valves. To change notes, that is, you're blowing all open, what we'd call open notes. I think B flat, I can't remember my open notes now, but used to, it was B flat, and E flat and G, I think, were the ones, I believe. Don't quote me on that though. That you would blow with an open bugle, and then you would finger valve for the rest of them, is the best I can remember. That's been a while since I've played instruments, brass anyway. On the 10th day, you shall have a holy convocation, and you shall humble yourselves. Seriousness, no time for joke. I like to joke as well as the best man, the next man, but when it comes to this, there's no joking involved. It would be like joking around about the president. You don't do that, because if you do that, you might find the guys in the black coats coming to get you at your house and hollering, well, it was just a joke, won't do you a bit of good. So you have to watch what you say. And so God means business here. Holy convocation. Afflict yourselves, you shall do no work, but you shall offer a burnt offering to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, 1 bull from the herd, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old, and see that they are without blemish. So you get the idea there. You go through a lot of bulls, a lot of rams, and a whole lot of lambs. Who's raising all this? You know, that's a lot to be raised. You might get tired of eating a lot of lamb even, but this is what God expected out of these sacrifices. The Feast of Trumpets offerings is what we would call this, and is what we're talking about here. And then 12 through 38, on the 15th day, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall observe a feast to the Lord for 7 days. So and this would be the Feast of Booths. Now, the Feast of Booths is for later on. Now, when they're no longer in the wilderness on their way to the Canaan land, when they're in the Canaan land, they're settled, they have this so they can remember these times when they dwelled in booths getting to the promised land. And so that's what we're about pretty well. Most of the rest of the chapter is this way. Then we continue on in 29. It says, you shall present these to the Lord at your appointed times. It's what God expects these to be. And Moses spoke to the sons of Israel in accordance with all, A-L-L, get that, when you have all, there's no more to say, that the Lord had commanded Moses. He told the people, verse 40 points out, he told them everything. Now, chapter 30. We get into now regulations and vows. They need to understand these regulations that had been given to their parents. Moses spoke, verse 1, to the heads of the tribes of the people of Israel, saying, this is what the Lord has commanded. If a man vows a vow to the Lord, swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. How many people do you know that tell you one thing, and because it's not in writing, they won't do it, and there's no way you can hold them to it? I get tickled, this little commercial talking about these instant replays. You know, they've got them in the football. The coach he can offer a challenge, throw a red flag out there. Of course, the referee's yellow. He throws a red out, and some things they can challenge. They go look at it under the hood, and, well, yeah, that's different than what we called on the field. So sometimes we need a challenge on some people, and we need some guy to run out there and show it with a TV so we can see what the guy actually said. Now he's got to eat crow because he did say it. But anyway, God says when you make a vow, you do according to all that proceeds out of your mouth. And then we have various things. If a man makes a vow, he's going to do that. Now we get 3 to 5. Now, so somebody can't say, well, you just said that to a man, you didn't say it to anybody else. So, okay, here goes. A woman in her father's house in her youth, if her father should forbid her, none of her vows shall stand, and the Lord will forgive her. See, when she's still living at home, she's not a consenting adult. She is not responsible for any kind of vow that she would make, but her father would be. And that's what we're talking about in verses 3 through 5. The father would be responsible. It's just like a daughter still at home. If she got caught shoplifting, the daughter may not be responsible, but the father would. Any monetary responsibility would fall, and that's what this is saying. Goes on, gives some, says her father hears of her vow and her pledge by which she has bound herself, and says nothing to her, then all her vows shall stand. Father's going to stand behind it. Every pledge by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her father opposes her on the day that he hears it, no vow of hers, no pledge by which she has bound herself shall stand. So it's like a cosigner on a loan. If you don't have enough horsepower to make a loan, then they're not going to make you a loan. But if you've got a cosigner, they've got enough horsepower, they're going to make a loan because they've got a guarantee of their money. That's the type of idea we're talking about. Then we have a vow of a widow or a divorced woman. Now, let's go see what this says. Verse 9, any vow of a widow or a divorced woman, anything by which she has bound herself, shall stand against her. If she vowed in her husband's house or bound herself by a pledge with an oath, and her husband heard of it, this is a woman, not a widow in this case, verse 10. Her husband heard it and said nothing to her and did not oppose her, then all her vows shall stand. But if her husband makes them null and void on the day that he hears them, then whatever proceeds out of her lips concerning her vows or concerning her pledge of herself shall not stand. Her husband has made them void. Now, this goes along with the idea that we've talked about many times, that women really didn't have a whole lot of rights in the Old Testament. We saw in our last lesson about the daughters of the man that began with Z. His name began with Z. That's the easiest way to talk. That's just like the man that invented television. I always called him Dr. Z because he had a long name, but it began with Z. And the Lord made provisions for them to get an inheritance if their father didn't have any sons. So that's kind of the idea. And so the husband is going to have to be the guarantor of the woman's vows, since the woman really didn't have any place as such in society. That's what it goes to. This is the vow of a married woman, how it goes, and basically says if he hears her and don't say anything, she's got to honor that vow. If he hears her and he opposes it, our next lesson, this will be our last lesson in this series, and it's going to be Numbers chapter 31 through 36:13. A lot of this material in 31 through 36 is also going to carry over to when we get into Joshua, end of Deuteronomy. Of course, Moses is going to die, going to go up Mount Nebo, Pisgah, and die in chapter 32 of Deuteronomy. And then in Joshua, we're really going to get into the conquest and division, but we're getting into the allocating land, who's going to be where in this next lesson. So stay tuned for the next lesson. The next lesson is going to be pretty interesting. I don't think you'll want to miss that lesson. You won't want to miss it. So with that, if you found this video helpful and want to learn more, be sure you download the note card that goes with this lesson, and also our free Bible correspondence course. Now, I said note card. We don't have a note card, but if I get that chart in here, you'll want to download that for sure. And that'll help you in other studies as well, even with other people's Bible studies. You'll find the links to each of these in the description below. And with that, we here at the Spring Hill Church of Christ want to help you with your growth in the knowledge of God's Word. We're not after your money, okay? A lot of people have videos and audios, and they're making money on them. I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's their thing. But we're not trying to make money off of it. We want to share this information with you. And feel free to use any of this material we put on any of these book studies to the glory of God. We're in it for the likes and subs, simply. So be sure to subscribe. So thanks for watching or listening. There are sites you can get these on audio. If you don't have a way to watch them, you can listen to them while you're traveling. MP3, what we call, that's a file format, a very good file format for transporting, taking with you in your automobile, your cars, and listening or watching on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook even. If you're not a member of our Facebook page, look us up, Mac Mike. I believe Mac Mike is the way we are on Facebook, my page, but also SPH Church of Christ, Spring Hill Church of Christ on Facebook. Write us there and like us especially. So thanks for watching or listening. In the meantime, in between time, we'll see you next time. Cheerio. Bob's your uncle.